Good evening. It would be feeble of me to wrongfully inform that this terrifying tale is purely fictitious, designed to excite the imagination of my once younger self. For this tale of ghosts and ghouls most haunting is rather a personal one, told by my mother, my grandfather, and my three uncles, all whom lived at the same location. In the 1970s, my grandparents, who worked in the hop fields of Lye with their 4 children, lived in a small farmer's cottage on Pigeon farm. All seemed well at the time. My mother and uncles would join my grandmother in the hop fields to earn some much-needed pocket money, whilst my grandfather was always working away in the drying kilns located at the top of the barnyard. That is, of course, until the hauntings began. It was one Sunday afternoon, and my young mother and one of her cousins were cleaning the outside yard from the mud off the tractors that had recently passed by. As they pushed all the dirty water away, they realized a drain had blocked. On further inspection, my mother made the discovery of old Victorian shoes dumped in the recesses of the drain, only to find out from another farmer nearby that a Victorian shoe factory once stood where the yard was built, and the children that died there, their shoes were supposedly removed and taken away. A few nights after the discovery was made, my mother and infant brother were in bed, only for my mother to be awoken by a tugging at her blanket. Thinking her brothers were playing a trick on her, she awoke. But it wasn't her brothers. It was, how she described, a pale greyish mist that was tugging on the blanket. The mist then leaped onto her bed, freezing my mother with terror before leaping to my then infant uncle's cot. Short of breath and trembling with fear, my mother, aged only 12 years, recited the Lord's Prayer. Shortly before my mother's prayer was complete, the misty apparition had faded, and to this day the memory of this paranormal event still haunts my now 56-year-old mother. The second tale takes place nearly a decade before the first, and was told to me by my grandfather. Pigeon farm in the 1960s. My grandfather and grandmother, newly married, were living in a tent in the nearby cherry orchard where they worked. A newly wedded Romany couple, they lived their life there in complete harmony, getting on with their work and having a good relationship with the farm's owner, until 2 major paranormal events unfolded. The first, as it was told, was after a hard day's graft. My grandfather, who was in his 20s at the time, went back to his tent for the night, expecting to cuddle up to me grandmother whilst they slept. As me grandfather put his arm around me grandmother, he noticed something was wrong. The body he was cuddling had wiry fur and was growling harshly. It was a moonlit night that night, and the creature arose and left the tent. It looked like a bear, my grandfather told me. When the bear-like creature left the threshold of the old canvas tent, it transformed into a man before disappearing right in front of my grandfather's eyes. To this day, my grandfather, who is now 82 years of age, still claims he slept next to the devil himself, and the memory of which still haunts him to this day. A few weeks later, my grandfather was tasked with gathering water from the nearby water pump, slightly up from where the tent was. As he filled his bucket, he heard a noise behind him. Shocked and startled, he turned behind him, and in the pale moonlight, he saw one of the buckets being walked back down towards the tent by unseen hands. Shocked and confused, my granddad went back to the tent. He kept what he'd seen to himself, for he knew that the devil was not at play again, but he knew that the cherry orchard he was living on was haunted. So if you find yourself walking or driving down Dingle Lane, and you find yourself at Pigeon House Farm, just ask yourself, am I really alone? Join us next time for Terrifying Tales, part 2 of this video, The Ghosts of Lie.